Thank you for that beautiful praise music. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming out and celebrating the life of Harry Mortenson with our family. We'd like to make a special welcome to our guests that are here today, family, distinguished visitors, all those who have taken time to come and be with us this day. We would like especially to express our sincere appreciation to Myra G. Martin, President and CEO of the Smith Center, for allowing us to use this venue, and the Smith Center for the Performing Arts. To Ms. Beth Barbrede, the Executive Director of Nevada Ballet Theater, for donating so many tickets so our family could enjoy the ballet tonight in honor of Harry. To the Nevada Ballet Theater, to Mr. Donald R. Kemp, who's been playing the piano right there for us, and to Ms. Michelle Boyd, who has made so much possible and done so much for us in organizing this event. Join us now as we celebrate the life of Harry Mortenson. We'll proceed first by hearing from Harry's oldest son, Eric Mortenson. After that, we'll be honored to hear from Miss Nancy Hospels of the Nevada Ballet Theater. Eric?
Thank you all for coming. My siblings voted me up here first, so I get to talk a little bit about science and technology and how it related to my father. He's quite the guy. I won't go into all the details and his exploits on the science side. He did testify in front of Congress as an expert in that field. But what I'm going to touch on, I'm going to share a few things that stand out in my memory, how fascinating and life-changing it was when we met on his wing. First of all, let me say my dad was my hero. He definitely changed the world for the better. For me, he didn't just change the world, he changed how I saw it. He was a scientist, and scientists see things as we all do, like feelings and emotions. However, he demonstrated in so many ways that scientific knowledge gave you a little extra edge, a little extra insight. My father was a humble man, and he never forced me to follow in his footsteps. However, he was a constant example of how great it might be to walk in his shoes. He so exemplified the think outside the box principles that you could not help but be entranced with his solutions to almost everything. They were Occam's razor elegant. My sister summed it up best when she presented him with a button that said, "Why, yes, I am a rocket scientist." For those of you, there'll be some pictures upstairs that show his hobbies, his rocket program, and some other things. Just fascinating stuff if you get a chance to see it. The first time I realized how cool my dad was, we were visiting the Nevada test site, and I was little. We came barreling up to the gate, and I was greeted by a huge lead-covered tank. It was an actual tank, giant robotic arms, and it's looking down at me. I felt like a little Chinese guy in Tiananmen Square that was so famous on the Time magazine, staring down the tank. And a lady asked me to take an egg out of a carton. And I took it, thinking, this can't be dangerous. My dad wouldn't let me do anything dangerous. And I held it up, and this tank swoops down and grabs the egg without breaking it. And I was like, wow, my dad's George Jetson. We finished touring the cell blocks and looking through 3-4 foot thick like glass walls, and we got to play with those robot arms. And at the end, we actually got to see what my dad did, and came around to this area. And he actually developed a device that actually could photograph the inside of a hot nuclear rocket. No one could figure out how to do that, and my dad nailed it. He pulled it off. I have to pull back for a minute and not only compliment my dad, but a whole generation of scientists and engineers who were the last to work without real computers. They were the last scientists, primarily which was his constant companion. It's 3 pieces of wood strapped together. You slide that thing around and do calculations that way. He always kept it hanging above the computer, encased in glass instead, in case of emergency, break glass. And for those of you wondering if I taught me how to use that thing, the answer's yeah. As we got a little older, my dad helped me win really important arguments with my friends. I mean, like really important arguments. We're all watching Star Trek and trying to figure out, arguing about how much antimatter it would take to blow up the Earth. Well, I could go home and ask my dad how much. Like, how cool is that? So he would sit down and start doing the calculations with my little blade swinging on the chair. And of course, being a scientist, he asked me, well, are we talking about annihilation of life as we know it on the surface? Or are we talking about like Death Star blow up the planet? And I'm like, let's go with the Death Star. A lot of people don't know that my father taught electronics at Duke University, and that was another series of adventures in my life. Some kids would go fishing and hunting with their dads. We calculated and created homemade parabolic dishes, mounted LNAs on them, alignment and tracking things, and voila, we were tracking Russian satellites and actually getting pictures from them. It was a lot better with s'mores. Laws of thermodynamics, entropy, conversion, conservation of energy. If you don't understand any of that, it's okay if you sat with him for an hour. You understand it clearly. I heard an animal speak at a commencement ceremony the other day about changing the world, and it sort of brings me full circle. The animal had an impressive list of, a simple but impressive list of things you need if you want to change the world. And one that stuck out in my mind was, to change the world, you need to find a good co-pilot to go with you through it. My mother was that co-pilot. Thank you, Mom. You are the rock. My father was a constant source of optimism. Every year it was like, better than last year. My friends always commented me how much I loved my dad. I do. Dad, you'll always be my hero.
We'll now hear from Miss Houses.
I'm always too short. Thank you. Harry Mortenson was a good guy. He was a kind and gentle man. He had a happy face with a snowy white beard and a warm expression. And yes, I think he looked a little bit like Santa Claus. He also had a brilliant mind and a gentle soul. When I first met Harry around 1972, he was running around Julie Bailey Theater taking pictures of our dancers. We were a new company, Nevada Dance Theater. And I said to our artistic director, who is that guy? And he said, oh, he's a nuclear physicist. And that was the beginning of a 44-year friendship with Harry Mortenson, and of course, Mrs. Santa Claus, Helen Mortenson. Harry loved the arts, especially the art form of dance. In the early days, he was our company photographer and our sound man, and he donated thousands of dollars to the company, and of course his time was always free. And I remember he took some of the most, and maybe you'll see some of them upstairs, he took some of the most beautiful dance pictures that I've ever seen. He had an innate sense of the body movement in space, and when the movement would peak, Harry caught it, and his nuclear brain caught it, and the scientist and the artist were one. For years, Harry served on our board of directors, and when he was in the assembly, he got the company a $1,000 grant, $100,000 grant. I'm used to the others. And we did a world tour of Nevada. Well, him getting $100,000 from the government was a miracle. And he served on the board for many years, and he counseled us through many years of harrowing experiences. And I always fondly think of him in board meetings interrupting, saying, well, why don't you try this? Or have you ever thought of doing this? Or maybe you should change this for a better result. He was such a wonderful guy and such a help to us, especially in those early years before he became so famous. But you know, Harry loved being part of our emerging dream, and he certainly did help it become a reality. For years, Harry and I talked about another dream, the dream of a performing arts center in Las Vegas. As life would have it, at this point, Harry and I parted company. He was supporting a group that wanted to build the Performing Arts Center in Summerlin, and I was supporting another group that was working on this location. And in all those early years, I never heard Harry utter a negative word. Others did, but not Harry. I remember one day he said to me, Nancy, no matter what, let's just get the Performing Arts Center built. And in March of 2012, when we opened the center here, nobody was happier than Harry Mortenson. So, I will miss Harry. I will remember a man with a brilliant mind and that gentle soul. Harry is now one with the universe.
We'll now hear from Harry's daughter, Lisa.
Good morning to you all. Even though I live in Nashville, Tennessee now, I have not managed to put the y'all into my vernacular yet. But if you have had a chance to listen to Eric and Miss Hossels, and if you had a chance to glance at the eulogy written about my father in the program, you begin to appreciate what an amazing person he is. And I would like to kind of bring in a few insights into my dad that probably none of you really knew, or you might not even believe me when I began to tell you. You always knew Harry Mortenson as the man behind the camera and creating or recording art that was created by others. But truly, deep down in his soul, my dad was a performer. Really, he really was. Some of my earliest memories at home were of my dad singing in his incredibly rich baritone voice. He loved Broadway musicals. He would sing "Oh, What a Beautiful Morning" from Oklahoma and Mariah from Paint Your Wagon. I mean, it was amazing. He'd be cooking us breakfast in the morning, and just this rich, wonderful voice was just booming out. Even at the last, we were all surrounding Dad in the hospital, and he was not conscious, he was sleeping, and we sat there, we were kind of waiting to see if he was going to come out of it, and we were just all sitting in the family, we were just joking around, and we said, you know what? We would not be surprised if Dad pops up in bed and graces us with a rousing rendition of Pass the Biscuits and Brandy. This is a silly song about hillbillies in Tennessee, and I kind of find it ironic because I now live in the hills of Tennessee, and yes, I have sung that song for my children on several occasions. Musical theater is actually how my parents met. When my dad was a physicist at the Savannah River Laboratory, my mom was with a performing group called the Augusta Players, and Dad and his roommate decided it'd be great fun to go crash the cast party. And, in his oral history, he was like, oh, we thought this would be a really fun thing to do. And so we got there, and they got in there, and he saw Mom, and he was like, whoa. And, and my dad was about 8 years older than Mom. And, and everybody ribbed him because, he said he was robbing the cradle and all this sort of stuff. But, yeah, he fell head over heels for Mom. And, I grew up in a household of parents that were performers. And Dad would always, he played an Irish cock and arsenic and old lace in the slideshow upstairs. If you get a chance to look, there's a couple of pictures, the ones I really wanted to see. Dad in like a Three Musketeers, outfit, with his feather. He was in performing groups. He loved performing. Me and my brothers, growing up in that kind of environment, it was not unusual for anybody in the house to be breaking out in some kind of accent, And so we had so much fun. I mean, it was very entertaining growing up. Every year, I would wait with great anticipation as I watched my parents get dressed up for Halloween. They always went to a costume costume party, every year. And I would just wait and see what my dad came out looking like. Was a vampire or a werewolf or something like that. And another picture up in that slideshow is one of my absolute favorite pictures of my mom and dad. It's before they were married, and they were dating, and they were at a Halloween party. And Mom is this gorgeous Grecian goddess, and Dad's kneeling at her feet, and this amazing Roman legionnaire kind of toga thing, and wow, you get some good leg line on my dad there too. So, probably a big surprise to most of you is it's not a big surprise. My dad loved classical music. It was always played in our home, really loud, shake the walls, floors vibrating, classical music. He played a huge variety of composers, but the ballet composers were his favorite. Adam, Copland, Delibes, Prokofiev, Stravinsky, Vivaldi, but most of all, it was Tchaikovsky that I went to bed with. Went to bed sleeping, listening to Tchaikovsky. And it was not easy because it was played really loud, even though it was bedtime. I remember being in 5th grade, I never listened to anything. That was the only thing that was played in our house. There was no radio, there was nothing. And I was in 5th grade, and I was asked to fill out a questionnaire. I was like, what's your favorite book? What's your favorite this? What's your favorite band? And my friends are all putting Beatles, Elton John, The Carpenters, whatever, at Jackson 5, I'll date myself. And so I filled in on my little thing, my favorite band. It's not technically a band. This is the only name I know. I put Tchaikovsky, and I'm sure I spelled it right. You know, Dad, make sure we spelled it. I don't think my teacher even knew how to pronounce the guy's name. She was like, you know. So yeah, that was my life. I bet you never knew my dad was an amazing artist. Mom's an amazing artist. I wish you guys could see, so I wish we brought some of the artwork that they've done. He sketched a lot in pencil and charcoal, and I remember sitting with him for hours as he taught me to get my proportions correct, how to create three-dimensional effects, how to assess the shading of an object and make that appear on my sketch pad. We used to have this mountain goat. It was a statue of a mountain goat named Harry. And, you know, go figure. And it had curly hair, and that thing was, there was so much shading in those curls of that hair. And it took forever for Dad to sit there, no, there's the highlight, you can squint your eyes, you can see, you know, okay, got it. Yeah, he never did finish a project, but, you know, as long as we got the principle right, I mean, we could, do it. I was so ready to be done with that mountain goat, but I can tell you, I sketch things all the time, and it goes back to those lessons he taught me. He was always teaching us, just like Eric said. Dad was always teaching us. When we were little kids, we used to sit in bed between Mom and Dad because we would never go to bed very well. And so to put us to sleep, we'd snuggle in between Mom and Dad would give us math problems until we fell asleep, you know. So, you know, Eric obviously had, higher times tables than I did. I was still kind of doing addition and subtraction. We're talking little kids. I mean, we knew our math before we went to kindergarten. Whether it was that or we're getting chemistry sets. I mean, I got chemistry sets and hydraulic pumps kits instead of Barbies at Christmas. I really did, you know. And he would explain, scientific principles anytime. We were driving in the car. I remember I was probably about 7 or 8, and we were driving to a radio station, and Dad had to take his audio track for his business that he had. He was taking it to the radio station, then to air it. And it was just Dad and I in the car, and he was explaining how radio waves are sent and how they're received in the car. And he was just going on and on, and Dad loved to go on and on and on. He's got so much more information than you're ready to, take in. And he probably looked down at me, and I was just quietly absorbing it all, listening to it. And he probably thought I was just stubbornly ignoring him, because I was definitely the stubborn one in the family. Oh yeah. And, finally we rounded a corner, and he's like, hey, look, there it is, up on the hill. There's the radio station. And I'm looking at it, my head kind of cocked to the side, and I was like, all right, so we're driving at 60 miles an hour towards that radio station. Why is the music not getting faster? Because we're running into those radio waves faster than they were when we were on a trajectory that was perpendicular, And he's like, he just started laughing, because he really thought I was ignoring him. And, I was just mulling it over in my brain, picturing these radio waves in the car. And he's like, you're right. We are actually, the music is faster. It's such a teeny percentage of what it is, you can't notice it. So it was just fun. The science fair came around, and I'm like, I don't know, what should I do for science fair? My dad's like, why don't you build a spectroscope? Okay. So I researched it a little bit, and I'm like, okay, Dad, I got everything I need to build my spectroscope, but they're talking about this thing called diffraction grating. I need some diffraction grating, to break up the light waves. And he's like, I got some of that. It's like, goes into the dark room and pulls out diffraction grating, and yes, I made this really amazing, award-winning spectroscope. It was like, it was awesome. My dad loved to play the piano. I bet you never knew that. I bet you never heard him play the piano. When I was probably in high school, we did some arranging of the house, and the family piano ended up in my bedroom. And I came home one day from school, and there's Dad sitting at the piano, and he's got this Beethoven book that he just bought. He went out and bought it, and he's going through Moonlight Sonata. It's written in the key of G, which means it has F sharps in it. And he's so frustrated because he kept trying to play, he kept forgetting to sharpen the Fs. So he finally went and got himself a little red pencil and he circled every single F in the entire piece. It's a long piece. And it was just, I still have that piano book with all those little F's circled in. I just get a kick out of it, when I see that. Aspen Ballet, what can I say? Other than Mom, it was his greatest love. When he was in college, he taught the local ballet master into letting him take a ballet class. And they kind of had a silent agreement between the two guys. It's kind of the guy thing. I mean, the ballet master knew Dad was only there to be able to hang out with the ballerinas. You never want to be a dancer, but they, he did pick up enough terminology and technique that when he was taking photographs of dancers, that he was able to tell them what he wanted. If he wanted a third arabesque, or a pas de chat, or a attitude croisé devant, he really loved that. There's pictures up there. Yeah, you guys know what I'm talking about. Yeah, I'm assuming you're all dancers. You guys all look like dancers. As Nancy Hostel said, he knew how to capture a dancer at the peak of their jump. And as I teach my dancers back in Nashville, I'm like, I teach them to perform for a photographer. I'm like, you hit this and you hold that momentarily, because if there's a photographer, that's the shot they need. When you're jumping, you gotta make sure at that peak of that jump, your head's lifted, your arms, that, I learned that from my dad, sitting with him, taking pictures, in the audience. He's like, okay, you see that? It's right there. That's the moment you take the picture. He thought ballet was the epitome of everything, the epitome of fine art. So obviously, it'd be the greatest thing to put in his newspaper ads, selling his high fidelity equipment. He surrounded the ballet dancers on point in tutus or leotards or whatever with his high fidelity equipment and shot those pictures, and that's what submitted to the newspaper. And it was great. The ballet dancers got print work to put in their portfolios. He's always looking to support the ballet. As Nancy said, he did so much. If I have to edit a piece of music, I've got my digital editing master. It's wonderful. I just look at it, it tells me exactly, and I'm looking at my, half a second. I need this chop to here. I hit the delete button. I'm good. They didn't have that. So I remember Dad with these reels, these huge reel-to-reel audio tapes. Because when a choreographer choreographs ballet, they don't use every single piece. They take this track here and that selection there, and sometimes they even change the order just to fit their vision. And so there'd be Dad listening to it like 500 times, right there. And he'd cut and splice it with tape. It's like a cassette tape. And it was mind-boggling that he could get it. Just like this, they'd have a really cohesive piece of music for the performance. As his only daughter, you can guess, I was put in ballet when I was really, really small, and only ballet, and I stayed there, went without a ballet school, started theater. Actually, I was without an ass there back then. I, of course, was enrolled in that program, started with children's ballet, worked my way up through the corps de ballet, and I was surrounded. Thanks to my dad, I was surrounded by ballet my entire life. When I had, my friends had pictures of, pop stars on their wall from Teen Beat and Tiger magazine, I had a life-size poster of Rudolph Nureyev doing a back cabriole, I'm really life-size. It was from here to the ceiling. It was, that was my life. That's what I looked at every day in my room. One of the most amazing things, I think, experiences I had with my dad was when I was little, I was about 8 or 9, and Dad had a convention or a buying trip in Los Angeles they had to go to, and Mom's like, what is she talking about? And Mom went with us, and the Royal Ballet happened to be performing in Los Angeles that weekend, so my dad gave me the great privilege of coming along on this trip. And I remember sitting, you're going to have to sit very quiet and very proper, during all these meetings and negotiations, all this sort of stuff. But finally, we'd have to go to the ballet. And they performed Coquet there that night. It was magical. It was, I don't know, that's my favorite ballet. I probably use a selection every year from Coppelia and on our recitals, because it was such a great thing. I continued in ballet. I mean, I think I would have been really disappointed if I hadn't. I opened up dance programs in Alaska and in South Korea when my husband was stationed there with his military career. My youngest daughter is one of my ballet students, where I teach in Nashville. And really over the years, and especially during the last few years, the last conversations I had with my dad were about ballet. It's the thing we shared. We talked about what was going on here with Nevada Ballet Theater. I told him about master's classes I took with Galina Mizensova, the music I was choosing for recital pieces. I would have to hum something. I know what I want. I know what I can't remember what ballet because whatever. He's like, oh, that's from this, and it's third act. And I'm like, thank you. And we talked about so many different things. Even last October, my husband surprised me with a horse-drawn carriage ride downtown Nashville, and we pulled up in front of TPAC, the Tennessee Performing Arts Center, and there on the marquee was Swan Lake. And I completely forgot that they were doing that then, and I talked to my dad. I was like, okay, Dad, oh, it's so great. We went to go see Swan Lake. We talked about all this different stuff. We talked about the different productions we've seen of that ballet. We talked about the Toshis I bought, to support their program during intermission, how I dug through the pile till I found a pair autographed by the principal dancer that had played Odette and O'Dial. And then we're sitting there talking like, oh, I can't believe this cat, but I looked inside, the toe shoes, and they're the exact same shoes I dance in, the same box, shank, toe, heel, down, I mean, everything. And he was just laughing and because he got that, he totally understood what I was talking about. It was so enjoyable being so connected to somebody that I haven't lived near. I mean, since I've been married, I haven't lived near my parents for 30 years, over 30 years. But to have that connection and have this enthusiastic conversation about what we love, it was just wonderful. Like Eric said, Dad was always a teacher. Up until the end, he was still teaching me. I had sent him just a picture from my phone of some of my dancers at a dress rehearsal, and I just was showing him some costumes I had made. That's all it was supposed to be, just this quick little shot. And I caught up the phone with him. I said, did you see it? And he's like, his first comment was critiquing the angle that I shot it at. I'm like, Dad, it's from my phone, come on. He's like, no. If you're taking, when photographing dancers, you take a shot from the waist or below because it lengthens the leg line. And I'm like, okay, Dad, but did you like it? and it's so funny because ever since then, whenever I photograph dancers or girls at prom, or basically generally people in general, I get down really low, at the waist low or lower, and oh my gosh, the shots are amazing. It's been such a privilege to be associated with such a great man and have this connection that we're able to share. And I just want to say thanks, Dad. You're just an amazing, amazing person.
We'd now be honored to hear from Mr. Lee Stolzen from Henry's office.
Hello everyone. Senator Reed is very sad that he can't be with us this afternoon, but he wrote this letter and wanted me to share it with you. Dear friends, I was saddened to hear of Harry Mortenson's passing. Harry was an ally that brought credibility and substance to my efforts throughout my career. I depended on his knowledge as a nuclear physicist to gain a better understanding of the flaws inherent in the Yucca Mountain site. Harry's contributions were significant in making sure that there will never be nuclear waste stored in Nevada. Harry was an exemplary assemblyman. In his 14-year career as an elected official, he never lost a race and won 7 consecutive elections. During his time at the legislature, he was able to increase funding for science and math education. As a scientist and a former employee of the Nevada test site, Harry knew the importance of these topics for our youth years before anybody was calling it STEM. His other major area of accomplishment was in conservation and environmental protection. Almost 10 years ago, Harry and Helen first presented the issue of fossil conservation in the upper Las Vegas wash to me. I thought they were crazy. What were they talking about? I had no idea that we had a treasure trove of fossils right here in the Las Vegas Valley. Together, they worked to build the Ice Age Park Foundation and the protectors of Tule Springs. And without the perseverance and advocacy of these groups over the years, we wouldn't have protection for these precious treasures. I am happy that we got this bill passed and that it's the law of the land. This park is helping transform Las Vegas into a top destination for paleontologists, fossil lovers, and curious tourists. I am glad to have seen Harry one last time back here at the press conference announcing the passage of the Tule Springs Fossil Beds National Monument Act. Helen, it is my hope that the passage of time will assuage the anguish of your bereavement. Sincerely, Harry Reid, Democratic leader. Thank you.
We'll now hear from Kurt Mortenson. Who's
All right, Paul. Who'll be here last? It's going to be the hardest. I'm Kirk, and I'm proud to say I'm Harry Mortenson's youngest son. I can stand up here and attempt in a short amount of time to tell you about my father. Excuse me. His accomplishments as a businessman, whether it was with Via Corporation and Interior Systems, a very successful business, or with Sigma Scientific, where I worked with them in satellite communications. We revamped how they did sports books in this town. We did some amazing things. I have some fond memories of working with them. Or then later on, the consulting work he did. I can tell you about his success in the legislature. I think everybody knows quite a bit of that, what's been said already. But, you know, the Truth in Balloting Act, which allows all of us in the state to be able to look at a ballot issue evenly from both sides, where before it really wasn't, which is just kind of the center of, you know, what he thought. It was all about working for the people and making it better for them. The Tule Springs National Monument was just that my mom and dad worked heavily on that. And even after he got out of the assembly, still worked tirelessly to make that happen. I think it's an amazing piece. The arts, you know, as Nancy also said, he's supported the arts so much, it's kind of part of why we're in this building today, for many reasons. But I want to talk to you about my father instilled a sense of adventure in the family as well. When we were all very young, we went to Northern Europe. We spent the summer traveling around to our family back there, and it really instilled in all of us, my brother and my sister, my mom and my dad, instilled in us this desire for adventure and travel. And, you know, whether it was England or Moscow or Peru and Machu Picchu, Galapagos Islands, you know, I remember being very young and him coming back from Japan, and obviously wherever he went, he took pictures. And he had this picture in Ginza, Japan. Well, later on in life, I found myself in Japan, and I took my camera and I went down to that same spot, and I took a picture of the building that he took a picture of. 30 years later, everything had changed. But the feeling of standing on that spot on the other side of the world, the place where he stood 3 years ago, it was amazing. Another passion of mine is scuba diving. You know, before Patty and Howie and all these educational groups, my dad went out and bought a double hose regulator and a book. Went out to the quarry, figured it all out. You know, obviously with my dad, he just got pressures of this and that. He had it all down. Took my mom out, taught her how to scuba dive. One of my favorite stories is when they were in the Bahamas. My dad was following behind her, and the water was so clear that when my mom kicked up dust in front of him, he held his breath going through it. He didn't want to breathe in the dust. Later on in life, we had a pool and scrounged out this old double hose regulator that was rotten to the core and falling apart. With my dad's help, me and my brother rebuilt that old double hose regulator and started scuba diving ourselves. Probably could have been the end of us, actually. Luckily, we got into some real equipment and saved ourselves. Sailing. Many of you don't know that my dad owned one of the largest boats on the Lake Mead in the very beginning. He had this sailboat, and he told me stories when he got this boat, and they delivered it to him, and he was all just anxious to get on the boat. He walked up there, and he looked at the boat, and was like, oh my gosh, where have I got myself? But became a very, very good sailor, and taught me how to sail. We'd go out to the sailboat all the time and fix it mostly, because that's what you do with sailboats. They say that the two happiest times in a sailboat owner's life is the day you buy it and the day you sell it. But we had some good times sailing that as well. And as my brother and sister said, it was always a learning experience. You know, they would tell me about the telltales and how to catch the wind and how the lake is more difficult to sail than any place in the world because the wind keeps changing on you. It doesn't do that offshore, but it does it at the lake all the time. I was lucky enough to go on and cruise some boats that were in sort of the races and actually win some awards with his knowledge on my side. We have a small sailboat that I'm looking forward to teaching my children the same way. You know, his hobbies, photography. Many people don't know he was into astronomy. Anything with optics he loved. He knew something about it. He just loved that portion of it. Electronics. Much like my brother, when I was younger, I got a course from the National Radio Institute. My dad picked it up for me, and we spent hours just learning about, learning from him. And it was funny because we were getting into the digital age, but all his foundation was in tubes. He always told me, "You build anything they're building now? The tube." Many people don't know he's also a published author as well. My dad has so many different traits and so many different ways. And this is what it's hard for me. Over the last couple of months, I think about it. I think all of that melody, all that is gone. And I had to come, and I had to think a lot. I had to understand, really open it up. And when I made my realization, I was down in the park playing with my kids, or going to school with my daughter, asking her what the too. Whoa, yeah, it is. But then my brother and my sister came, and we started talking about my dad and playing the jokes on each other that my dad played on us, and I realized, oh, that's not God. I got this entire huge family here, and all that carries on with him, and it carries on with me, it carries on with my sister and my brother, and what my mother and my father instilled in us. It carries on. A friend of mine asked me how do I feel about my loss. And I told him, I feel blessed. Because my grandfather passed away, and my dad was very young. And I said, I feel blessed because I got an extra 30 years with my dad. And then 30 years was the time that I got to love, I got to learn, I got to talk. And in the end, one of the most important things was the silence. I could sit at the table with my dad, and we didn't have to talk because everything had been said. And I know that if I live as long as my dad, and accomplish just a small portion of what he accomplished, and saw just a small portion of what he saw, that I would be incredibly happy with my life. And that's why I can celebrate his life. Thank you.
Thanks, Kurt. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Lisa's husband. I, of course, don't have all the wonderful stories that his children do from a lifetime of living with him, but my first experience with Harry, I think, was when I started dating his daughter. I walked in and there was this huge barrel-chested guy with a big beard and wild eyebrows. And I was like, oh. I thought, if I screw this up, it won't be a gun, it'll be an axe. And that's pretty much the way it was. Harry was a tremendous man. And Lisa and I, of course, ended up getting married. I think he let us get married so he could recoup part of his losses from the much amount of food I ate at their house. I remember Harry for so many amazing things. I went in one day and I sat down and he was working at his satellite stuff and he had a sketch and he had a drawing of the Earth and a satellite, and then there was all these angles and all these equations, and I was like, man, I'm in calculus and I can't follow this. Just an amazing man, truly. And in the early days of Lisa and our marriage, we struggled a lot. And it was him and Helen's generosity that really helped us many, many times. They gave us a car, a little beat-up car, but it was a wonderful car when you don't have anything. It was amazing. And I don't even know what to say. I guess that in the end, I'm so grateful because my father was killed when I was 5, and my stepfather died when I was 20. And when I married Lisa at 22, I got a dad back. And a mom, and they've always been that to me. I've always called them Mom and Dad. And so, it's an honor to be here and to be part of Harry's family. And I thank all of you for coming out to celebrate this time. time with us today. And I know that the family would like to invite all of you upstairs to the 5th floor for a gathering to celebrate Harry's life. Thank you for coming today.